Today's reading is Hebrews 12, verses 18 to 29. You have not come to a mountain that can be touched and that is burning with fire, to darkness, gloom, and storm, to a trumpet blast, or to such a voice speaking words that those who heard it begged that no further word be spoken to them, because they could not bear what was commanded. If even an animal touches the mountain, it must be stoned to death. The sight was so terrifying that Moses said, I am trembling with fear. But you have come to Mount Zion, to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem. You have come to thousands upon thousands of angels in joyful assembly, to the church of the firstborn, whose names are written in heaven. You have come to God, the judge of all, to the spirits of righteous made perfect, to Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant, and to the sprinkled blood that speaks a better word than the blood of Abel. See to it that you do not refuse him who speaks. If they did not escape when they refused him who warned them on earth, how much less we, if we turn away from him who warns us from heaven. At that time, his voice shook the earth, but now he has promised, once more I will shake, not only the earth, but also the heavens. The words once more indicate the removing of what can be shaken, that is, created things, so that what cannot be shaken may remain. Therefore, since we are receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken, let us be thankful and so worship God acceptably with reverence and awe, for our God is a consuming fire. This is the word of the Lord.
Thank you, Cameron, for that reading. Good morning. If you don't know me, I'm Neil. Been a member of the church here for quite a while now. It's my pleasure to be bringing the message this morning. So this term we've been looking at the start of the term as Jesus as King, and we're now continuing in our next bit of the series, which is Jesus' kingdom, the kingdom of God. And our passage today in Hebrews largely looks at this by contrasting two mountains, Mount Sinai and Mount Zion. So we have this tale of two mountains. So Mount Sinai refers to this meeting of Moses and Israelites that is actually from Exodus 19, but also some of what Hebrews draws on is Moses' words in Deuteronomy at the end of his ministry, shortly before he dies, when he's reminding the people to follow God. And it refers to the old covenant, the old rules and regulations about how God's people should interact with him. If you've not read this passage in Exodus recently, I'd encourage you to do so. Hebrews can at times feel like a complicated book because it references a lot of things from the Old Testament. It was written to Christians from a Jewish background. They would have been intimately familiar with this. And at times, if it doesn't make sense, I'd encourage you to kind of go back and read the bits that are referenced, because it really opens up what the writer is saying to us, and also it gives far more riches and depth as we do that. So that's the first mountain. The second mountain is Mount Zion. Now, Mount Zion is a hill that is on the south side of Jerusalem. It's where the temple was originally built by Solomon. But in the Bible, when the Bible refers to Mount Zion, it doesn't just refer to this physical place. It's very much referring to God's presence, his city, his rule, his reign, his eternal kingdom, much as it says in verse 22 when it says, you have come to the heavenly Jerusalem. And it's talking about the new covenant and the new access that we have through Jesus. So our passage today is seeking to answer the question that David posed in Psalm 24 when he says, who can ascend the mountain of the Lord? Who can stand in his holy place? It's still a relevant question today for God's people to consider. How do we approach God? What should our attitude be? What can we be confident in? But there is also a caveat. What should we be cautious about? And there's a tension in this passage here. There is great encouragement, but there's also some significant challenge. And there's discussion of what has come, but also what is coming, the now and the not yet that Elaine has been speaking to us about over recent weeks. Mountains in the Bible are significant. Many settlements were made in mountains. It was obviously easier to defend if you were at an advantage of height. But mountains also have their own ecosystem. They're kind of associated with water and rain and life. But mountains are significant because many of the significant encounters that God's people have with him are up mountains or up significant hills. When Jesus was transfigured, that was up a mountain. So mountains in the Bible represent thin places, places where the border between heaven and earth, between the distance between God and mankind, is smaller and thinner. And it made me wonder, what are thin places for you in your walk with God? Where do you find it easier to encounter the presence of God? For me, it's often in his word, it's in worship, particularly in walking and praying. I find I'm much less distracted when I'm walking than when I'm sitting down, much less likely to fall asleep. I had the privilege when I was a fourth-year medical student of going to Tanzania on my medical elective. It's quite a while ago now. But whilst I was there, I got the opportunity to try and climb Mount Kilimanjaro. It's the highest point in Africa, and I'll tell you how I got on a little bit later and whether I made it or not. But first, let's have a look at the first of these mountains, at Mount Sinai. And I've called this Mount Sinai, fear and fire. So when Moses and the Israelites come to the base of Mount Sinai before this encounter with God, they've just miraculously been drawn out of Egypt. They've seen numerous signs and wonders, not least of which the parting of the Red Sea to allow them to escape from the Egyptian pursuit. They have seen time and again how God is fighting for them, how God is on their side. And yet, when they come to this encounter, they are terrified. It's perhaps a little easy to gloss over kind of how scared they must have felt. But imagine you're at the base of a big mountain and the top of the mountain is on fire. It's smoking. The ground beneath your feet is shaking. You're in the middle of an earthquake right next to a volcano, effectively. And above all this, you're in the middle of a storm. Thunder is pealing from heaven. And even louder than the thunder, there is this heavenly trumpet blast coming from the skies. And if all that wasn't enough, there is a voice that is louder still, that is a voice like no other. The people are so frightened, they tell Moses, "You speak to God, only don't have him speak to us. We are afraid we will die." Prior to this encounter, God warns Moses to tell the people, don't let anybody else come up the mountain. Set barriers around the mountain. If even an animal or a person touches it, they must be killed. They didn't need to be told twice to keep their distance. "Oh no, Moses, you go up the mountain. We're very happy for you to do that. We'll stay down here, thank you very much." The receivers of this letter were were Christians from a Jewish culture. They were intimately acquainted from many stories in the Old Testament of just how risky it was for people to approach a holy, heavenly God without due care and attention, without due purification, and without being invited. Later, after Moses is given instructions to make the tent of meeting, and then later still, when Solomon builds the temple, only the high priest could come into the Holy of Holies. And that only once a year. He would come dressed in rich priestly robes, and only after the blood of animal sacrifice. Access was restricted. A holy, perfect God cannot tolerate sin and imperfection in his presence. A holy God hates sin. Our God is a consuming fire. But that's not our story. We, as the writer tells us, have come to Mount Zion. So let's look at that. And I've entitled this Faith, Not Fear. So Mount Zion, as we said, represents the very presence of God, the city of the living God. And we have an open access through Jesus, an open invitation to the presence of the Father. This reminded me of a story set during the American Civil War. There was a Union soldier who went and made his way to Washington. His father and his older brother had already been killed in the war, and he wanted to seek clemency to leave the battle lines to go and support his mother and sister in planting on the farm. When he got to the gates outside the White House, he was immediately rebuffed. Do you not know there's a war on? Get back to the battle lines where you belong. In despondency, he sat on a bench nearby, and a small boy came up to him who saw he was disheartened and asked him, "What's wrong?" So he told the little boy his story, and the boy said, "I can help you. Come with me." So he got up and he followed the boy and was amazed when the boy walked up to the gates that he had been rebuffed at, but more amazed still when he wasn't stopped. And him following the little boy, he walked straight through the entrance of the White House, through numerous checkpoints where they could have been stopped and barred, until they eventually made it to the door of the Oval Office. The little boy didn't even knock on the door, he walked straight in, and there, sat behind the desk, was President Lincoln, going over battle plans with his Secretary of State. The president looks up and sees the little boy and the soldier, and he said to him, "Good afternoon, Tad. What can I do for you?" And Tad Lincoln, who was the son of the president, said, "Daddy, this soldier needs to speak to you." We have a different mediator. The soldier could get into the place of highest authority because the son went before him. Through the son, he had open access. And our mediator too is different. Jesus speaks a better word. His blood speaks a better word than the blood of Abel and the old covenant access, we're told in verse 24. He has paid the price once and for all for our sin. As we were singing a moment ago, it is finished, Jesus said on the cross. And after his resurrection, he sits at the very right hand of God, constantly interceding for his followers, for you and for me. Through fully trusting in Jesus, we bear his priestly robes. The Bible tells us we are clothed with his righteousness. And verse 21 here declares that we are the righteous made perfect. In heaven, there is a place set aside for you and for me amongst a joyful assembly of thousands upon thousands of angels and angelic beings and other followers. There is the greatest of parties in heaven, and we all have an open, permanent invitation. And more than that, the passage tells us we are the church of the firstborn. The firstborn, meaning full rights, full inheritance, full access. Did you know that there aren't any second-class Christians with God? If you look around you today, at the people sitting around you or the people up on stage at times, did you know that God does not love you any less than any of those people? And I'll tell you why. It's because he couldn't love any of you anymore. He's all in his love for you. On Mothering Sunday, we celebrate some of the things that are best about mothers. Maternal qualities such as love and affection, nurture, gentleness, tenderness. Mothers being overwhelmingly in favor for the blessing of their children. I know some of us may not have been as lucky to have had those experiences, but all of us can recognize that these are good and wonderful traits. But if you think of the best mother you could possibly imagine or know, it doesn't even come close in God's tenderness and gentleness and goodness towards us. In Isaiah 49, when God is talking about how he relates to his people Israel, he says this, "Can a mother forget the baby at her breast and have no compassion on the child she has borne? Though she may forget, I will not forget you." So we have a call to come into the very presence of God boldly. There's a call to intimacy and a call to confidence. So we should approach God boldly with confident intimacy. But as I said before, there's also a warning, so let's look at that. When I was thinking of what to call this section, I've called it stirred or shaken. It's really stirred and shaken, but I was kind of thinking of a bit of a play on the shaken, not stirred bit from James Bond. But the word tells us that there is a great shaking to come. And so the question is, and the stirred bit is, will your hearts be stirred to get ready for when that shaking comes? Our passage really is a call back to purity, to purify ourselves and turn back to God, to seek to get clean. Before God's presence came on the mountain of Mount Sinai, the people were told to consecrate themselves, to get ready. And God told Moses that his desire was for his people to be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. And that's still God's call for his people today. The Apostle Peter writes this, a passage you may be familiar with. But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. Once you were not a people, but now you are the people of God. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. And he goes on to say, live such good lives. Live as free people. Do not use your freedom as a cover-up for evil. So we're called to get clean. We're called, as Hebrews puts it earlier in the chapter, to throw off the sin that so easily entangles. And we're called to turn back towards our Heavenly Father. And we're told that there's a judging coming. We'll all have one day to give an account. Verse 23, we're told that we come to the judge of all. And Paul reminds us of this in his writings when he says that one day we will stand before the judgment seat and give an account. We're called to purity. Be holy because I am holy, God says again and again to his people in his word. When I thought of this call to purity and of God being a consuming fire, I was reminded of a verse in Malachi, in the prophet Malachi, where he says, God sits as a refiner and purifier of silver. I don't know about you, but the idea of being refined in the fire doesn't sound very safe or very comfortable. It doesn't sit easy. But our God sits as a master purifier and refiner. And when you purify silver, when you do it by heat, you put it in the fire until it melts. Impurities are either burnt off or come to the surface and can be skimmed off. And the way the refiner knows when the purification, the refining process is complete is when he can see his reflection in the silver. It's made me wonder, with God being a consuming fire, if at times I am far more comfortable with my sin and my brokenness than I should be. I'm reminded in this passage of how much God hates sin. I'll say it again, he hates it. But the wonder and the beauty for us is how he loves sinners. He loves us, he loves us, he loves us. So my prayer for myself and all of us who are listening is that we would all know more fully the riches, the depths, the gentleness, the tenderness, the kindness, the patience, the goodness of God's love for us. And that we would all grow in seeking to be more like our big brother Jesus. That we would be drawn to surrender not out of fear, but out of those cords of love drawing us. And that we may come towards God more fully with reverence and awe, seeking a deeper holiness and deeper intimacy with him. Verse 28 says, let us be thankful and so worship God acceptably with reverence and awe. A time is coming when everything will be shaken. Only things that are heavenly will stand. Verses 26 and 27 tell us everything and everyone will be shaken. So the question for us really is, what are we building our lives on? What are we living for? Hebrews challenges with this question. When that shaking comes, will your foundations be found to be secure? Will you have built wisely? The Apostle Paul tells us this in 1 Corinthians 3. For no one can lay any foundation other than the one already laid, which is Jesus Christ. If anyone builds on this foundation using gold, silver, costly stones, wood, hay, or straw, their work will be shown for what it is, because the day will bring it to light. It will be revealed with fire, and the fire will test the quality of each person's work. If what has been built survives, the builder will receive a reward. If it is burned up, the builder will suffer loss, but yet will be saved, even though as one only escaping from the flames. So we have this tension. We are the righteous made perfect, but we are the righteous being made perfect. We are sanctified, we are being sanctified. Our destination is secure, but we're all still journeying up the mountain. So back to my attempt at Kilimanjaro. Did I make it? So I went up the Marangu Trail, as it's known. It's one of the easier trail and more popular tourist routes, sometimes known locally sometimes known to the locals as the Coca-Cola route because of that. The final ascent is up a very steep scree, and our goal was to get to the crest, which is called Gilman's Point. And so we leave at around between midnight and 1 in the morning, with the goal being to get there to see the dawn come up, as it's about 18,600 feet at that point. So I remember when we started up, it was dark, it was cold, it was really steep, and I found quite quickly that this was going to be harder than I thought it was going to be, because the altitude made me out of breath quite quickly. And I started to question, am I going to make this? And am I going to make it in time? And so I set myself this strategy, which was my guide was walking in front of me, and particularly because it's so steep, he was, some distance above me as well. And I thought, I'll just fix my eyes on the back of his boots. If I walk where he walks, I've got to trust that he knows how to get there and he knows what pace to set, that we can make it on time. And that strategy worked really well for me. We made it to Gilman's Point, and I was rewarded by seeing the sun come up. And if any of you have been at altitude and seen the sun come up like that, it's a miraculous light. It kind of comes up really quick, and for a few seconds, you get this 180-degree band of rainbow color across the sky. My picture there was taken with a basic camera. It doesn't really do it justice. But it reminded me of the beginning of Hebrews 12, where we're told to fix our eyes on Jesus, the one who has gone before us, but also that we can fix our gaze on those who have gone before and modeled walking up this mountain really well, or even those who are a bit further ahead on this walk with us in our community here. But Gilman's Point wasn't the highest point on the mountain. The peak is called Uhuru Peak, and it's about another, nearly 1,000 feet above that, a bit less than that actually. And to be honest, when I got to Gilman's Point, I was so exhausted and so out of breath, I thought, that's it, I'm done. But the last part of the climb up, I'd been walking with an Australian chap called Colin, who I'd met on the way. Our guides knew each other, so we'd been walking together. And Colin kept encouraging me. He said, look, you've done the hard part. That's the steep bit. The peak is not that far away, and it's actually more level getting up there. He said, look, you can make that. It's only meant to take half an hour. So I thought, I'll give it a go. And finally, I did make it, as the sign shows. But it took me about 90 minutes, because every time I had to stop after about 20 steps because I was gasping for breath because of the activity. But it reminded me that this journey up the mountain is not a solo activity. We're called to encourage one another. We're called to bear each other's burdens as we go. And we've got a much better chance of making it if we walk as family together. So not only is there a call to expectancy, a call to intimacy with God, a call to purity, but there's a call to community here as well. We're more likely to make it if we do this together. So I'll finish with this opening verse from Psalm 125, which is titled A Song of Ascents. Those who trust in the Lord are like Mount Zion, which cannot be shaken, but endures forever. Amen. The words on the screen, it says you are now at the highest, Hura Peak, the highest point in Africa, and it gives the altitude, which is 5,895 meters.
Neil, thank you so much. I feel like we should applaud.